So hi everybody. You know, we've covered a lot of exotic locations in our Fun with Maps shows. This episode is a place you may think is familiar, but I'll bet there are a lot of things about it you don't know. Welcome to another episode of Fun with Maps. I'm your host, Dan Hansen. This show is about the second largest country in the world. It's Canada, very close to my home here in Cleveland, Ohio. So it's the second largest country in the world, but it's one of the most sparsely populated. It's only got about 4 people per square kilometer. And you know, I see TV game shows and stuff, and contestants from the U.S. are always being stumped by Canadian basics. You know, we're going to see today Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories, okay? They extend from the Atlantic to the Pacific and northward to the Arctic. So it's not only the world's second largest country by total area after Russia, it has the world's longest coastline too. So let's take a look here. So here's a map of North America. See Mexico down there, the United States, and up here Canada and the Arctic Ocean. So as we'll see, you can see it's from the Pacific Ocean over here to the Atlantic, bordering the United States there, and we've got the Arctic Ocean up here, so close to Greenland. We'll touch on that again too. But that is essentially what we're looking at today in this episode of Fun with Maps, Canada. So its border with the United States is the world's longest international land border. And the population in 2023, it was about just over 38 million people. And the majority, as we'll see, live south of the 55th parallel and in urban centers such as Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver and some of those really large cities. You know, we could do an entire episode of Fun with Maps on any of these provinces, territories, islands, rivers, cities. You know, it's just, and hopefully we'll get to them because it really deserves some more attention. But in this episode of Fun with Maps, we're going to concentrate, take a very broad look at Canada, focusing and showing the 10 provinces and the 3 territories. So let's get started with this episode of Fun with Maps. So here's where Canada is in North America. Okay, it's this blue area, of course. And it goes from, here's the Arctic archipelago up here, all these islands. Here's the Hudson Bay. Here's Alaska. Here's Russia. Notice from Alaska here it comes down a little to the west of Canada there. Okay, this is all Canada. All Canada. And here it's interesting. You have this border here with the U.S., but it actually goes through some of these Great Lakes about halfway through or so, or some percentage through. The north half is Canada and southern half is the United States. And we'll see again here, but like look up here. When we did the Fun with Maps episode on Greenland, we saw how close Canada and Ellesmere Island actually in Greenland there. That's only about 10 miles away. So this gives you some perspective. There's U.S., Mexico, all that. So this is a more detailed map. By total area, if you include the waters here and all, Canada is the second largest country in the world after only Russia. It's 4th if you don't count the waters. But let's look at some of these details. So of course, again, here's Iceland, Greenland, here's Alaska, and coming down here, here's the United States. So up here, we're going to see these provinces down here, 10 provinces, and 3 territories here. And we'll refer back to this map because this is a good one. But you can see here a little better how the border comes through 4 of the 5 Great Lakes here. Everything but Michigan here. So Superior and Huron and Erie and Ontario. So that's the border there. And we'll look at this map some more. So the main focus of this episode, as we said, is defining Canada's 10 provinces and 3 territories. And there's some technical, legal differences between provinces and territories. It mainly has to do with who controls the government and how they're created and the powers delegated by the parliament and all that, which you can research if you want to. So I guess so the best way, let's just go through them real quick and let's start, let's go alphabetically. So these 10 down here, those are the provinces, okay? And these 3 up here, those are the territories. So alphabetically, we're going to look at first here at Alberta, and you can see there its capital, Edmonton. So this is a map by someone named MapGrid, and we're going to use his or her maps for all the provinces. They're really good. We appreciate it. MapGrid. So here's, again, the map. Greenland, Canada. This red area is the province of Alberta. It's one of the 3 prairie provinces, they call them, along with Saskatchewan and Manitoba. So you've got British Columbia on the west here, Saskatchewan to the east. These are the Northwest Territories. And down here, it borders the U.S. state of Montana. So that gives you some perspective. It's landlocked, just as Saskatchewan, the only ones. You got the Great Plains over here, the Rocky Mountains starting in here. It's the 4th largest province. It's about 255,000 square miles. It's also 4th most populous with about 4.2 million people. Again, we're not going to get into details of all the provinces and territories, but this is a good map, so I wanted to show this. You'll see the capital here is Edmonton, and the largest city, though, is Calgary here. So these two are kind of rivalries because about half of all Albertans live in either Edmonton or Calgary here. So English is the official language. It was created in 1905 with the Alberta Act. That's when the province of Alberta was created. So here's Edmonton, here's Calgary in Alberta. So here's British Columbia, next alphabetically. And again, this is a map by MapGrid. Thank you. They also just abbreviate a lot of times to BC, and you can see it's the westernmost province. Here's the Pacific Ocean. Okay. Here's Alberta, which we just looked at. And up here, you'll see it's Yukon and the Northwest Territories. Down here in the U.S., you'll see the U.S. states of Washington, Idaho, and just a touch of Montana there. Okay. Up here, obviously, this part here is Alaska, so that's the United States. It's got about 5.5 million people, so it's the 3rd most populous province in Canada. The capital is Victoria, but by far the largest city is Vancouver. Vancouver's down here. It's kind of across the border from Seattle, Washington. So here's Vancouver and then Seattle there. Okay. Vancouver and its suburbs make up the 3rd largest metropolitan area in all of Canada, with about 2.6 million people here in the Vancouver area. It's a really diverse, kind of exciting area. I would really want to do a Fun with Maps episode on just Vancouver itself because I had a great time visiting it there, and we'll get to that another time. Next alphabetically is Manitoba. Again, thank you MapGrid for this map. It's kind of like the longitudinal center of Canada. It's the 5th most populous province. It got about 1.3 million people there. And, you know, it's got a widely varied landscape. There's an Arctic tundra up here by the Hudson Bay, and then they got these freshwater lakes. And this is Lake Winnipeg, this big lake here. That's Lake Winnipeg. And down here to the south of that is its capital and largest city, which is Winnipeg. It's the 6th most populous municipality in Canada. 4 of Manitoba's 5 universities, all 4 of its professional sports teams, most of the cultural activities are all located here in Winnipeg. Right down there. So next will be New Brunswick. Okay. And again, MapGrid, thank you for the map. New Brunswick is small over here in the east. So you got Quebec over here, you got Nova Scotia over here, the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and then you got the Bay of Fundy down here. Here's the U.S. state of Maine. It looks, you know, they're almost connected here. Here's Maine, here's New Brunswick. It's about 83% forested, and, you know, the Appalachians start up here. About 28,000 square miles and about 775,000 people. Its capital is Fredericton, which is about here, kind of inland here and all. But its largest city is St. John, which is here on the bay here. So St. John is probably what you're most familiar with. That's right here. And it's the only province with both English and French as official languages. So next is the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And you can see the easternmost province. This is Newfoundland. the island. This is Labrador, okay? Labrador's continental, Newfoundland's the island. Totally, it's about 156,000 square miles, and there's about 500,000 people living there. The capital is here on Newfoundland, St. John's. It's over here. So the island of Newfoundland here and the smaller neighboring islands is home to about 94% of the province's population. More than half are in the Avalon Peninsula there. And the continental part of Labrador, you know, that's bordering Quebec here. Okay. What's interesting, in 1949, Newfoundland became the 10th and newest province to join the Canadian Confederation. It's just called Newfoundland. In 2001, fairly recently, the Constitution of Canada was amended to change the province's name from Newfoundland to Newfoundland and Labrador. So it was just called Newfoundland until 2001, and they threw in Labrador here, Newfoundland and Labrador, as names of the province. This is a plaque in St. John's in Newfoundland, and commemorating the English claim over Newfoundland, the beginning of the British Overseas Empire. So if we read it, it says, "Close to this commanding and historic spot, Sir Humphrey Gilbert landed on the 5th day of August, 1583, and in taking possession of this new-found land in the name of his sovereign Queen Elizabeth, thereby founded Britain's Overseas Empire." So you see, they called it New-Found Land, which of course got reduced to Newfoundland, and eventually a province of Canada with Labrador. So next up is Nova Scotia, okay, here to the east of New Brunswick. Again, thank you MapGrid for this map. Nova Scotia is Latin for New Scotland, okay, and there's a little less than 1 million people there. It's the second most densely populated province, and it's second smallest, you know, both after Prince Edward Island, just above it here. So this red, that's Nova Scotia, New Scotland. It's about 21,000 square miles. It's got Cape Breton Island and 3,800 other coastal islands. And it's connected here by the Isthmus of Chignecto, okay? And that's how it borders New Brunswick and the continent. So this is an isthmus here, Nova Scotia, tying it to New Brunswick, and that's how it's connected. So you've got the Bay of Fundy here and the Gulf of Maine to the west. Here's the Atlantic Ocean, of course. Prince Edward Island here is just across the Northumberland Strait from Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland here is just across the Cabot Strait from Nova Scotia. So here's New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland, Labrador, Quebec, U.S. state of Maine. So, okay, you can see down here, this is where Nova Scotia is in relation to Canada. But if we zoom in on Nova Scotia, here's this island, here's that isthmus we just talked about. That's what connects it to New Brunswick. This is Prince Edward Island, okay. Here's the Strait of Northumberland, right? This area in red is Nova Scotia's capital and largest municipality, Halifax. Okay, Halifax is home to over 45% of the population. It's the second largest coastal municipality after Vancouver. And the Port of Halifax, just by where it is geographically, it's the first, North America's first inbound and last outbound shipping gateway to Europe. So here we've got Nova Scotia way on the east here, and here's Halifax, major city, capital port right here, shipping gateway to and from Europe. So next comes Ontario, and again, MapGrid did this map, thank you. It's the most populous province in Canada. It's home to about 38.5% of the whole country's population, and this red area here is Ontario, and it's second in landmass to only Quebec of the provinces. You can see that the capital is Ottawa. That's up down here, depending on your perspective. Most populous city is Toronto down here. Okay, there's Toronto, there's Ottawa. You can see how here it's bordered by Manitoba over here. Here's the Hudson Bay. It borders it. Here's James Bay. Okay, and of course here's Quebec. Now if you look to the south here, again we had the it's bordered by the Great Lakes, and again this line here shows where the U.S.-Canada border is. So here's Lake Superior and Huron and Erie and Ontario. Those are all borders. Okay, and so you also have, in a sense then, to the south it's from west to east, it's bordered by Minnesota, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. Okay, and this is the St. Lawrence River, St. Lawrence Seaway here, opening up from Quebec, comes down here through Ontario, through the Great Lakes, into all the way into central United States here. Okay, this is Prince Edward Island. Again, the map by map grid. Thank you. Some people just refer to it as the island. It's obviously the smallest. Compare this little red area here to Quebec or Ontario or BC or any of that. Smallest in terms of land area and population, but it is the most densely populated. So there's, for its size, it's got a lot of people there. And Charlottetown is kind of in the middle here. That's its capital and largest city. It's only got about 176,000 residents. So, you've got the Gulf of St. Lawrence here, which is just north of Halifax, Nova Scotia. We looked at that. You got Quebec over here. It's the only Canadian province consisting solely of an island. So while we have Newfoundland here, it's connected with Labrador, so it's not just an island. That province is both of these, and we've got, of course, Nova Scotia is connected by that isthmus there. Prince Edward Island is one of the older Canadian settlements, so you'll see that in the population and their surnames, or they're Scottish and Irish and English surnames like that. So this is an image from Wladyslaw, W-L-A-D-Y-S-L-A-W. Thank you. This is the Confederation Bridge. So you've got this island here, Prince Edward Island, and it wasn't until May 1997 when this Confederation Bridge was opened, giving them a fixed link between Prince Edward Island and the mainland. So you have that island there just kind of out there on its own, but this Confederation Bridge, in 1997, is a fixed link between the island and the mainland. So this is Quebec. It's the largest province by area, as you can see in MapGrid's map here. Second largest in population after Ontario. Just like all of these, much of the population is along the south here, along the U.S. border, and here it's along the St. Lawrence River. You've got the capital up here, Quebec City. Down here you've got Montreal, which is the most populous city. So we've got Ontario here, we've got Labrador here, New Brunswick here, and here's James Bay, here's Hudson Bay, and down here we've got where it borders the United States. New England up there, Maine, and all. This is another map. This is from the Encyclopedia Britannica, and it just shows a little difference here. Here's James Bay, Hudson Bay, the Hudson Strait, Labrador Sea. We've got Labrador, Newfoundland, Prince Edward, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. Here's the U.S. There's the Great Lakes. There's Ontario, and here in Quebec here, we've got this Gulf of St. Lawrence coming down the St. Lawrence River. This is all of the St. Lawrence Seaway. And here we have Montreal, the biggest city of Quebec, right there. And famously, Quebec's official language is French. And it's a Quebecois French. It's kind of a regional variety. It's not exactly the language you would hear in France, but it's French, and that's the official language of Quebec. So next is another one of the three prairie provinces. This is Saskatchewan, and it's bordered by Alberta here, Manitoba here, Northwest Territories here. These four actually meet here with Nunavut, Down here, this is Montana. This is North Dakota. Okay, it's just like Alberta. It's landlocked, and it's got about 1.2 million people. Most of them live in the southern prairie half. It's more forests and sparsely populated up here, but there's Saskatoon, and then there's the provincial capital, Regina, about there. It became a province in 1905. You know, they carved it, and they carved a lot of land out of the Northwest Territories, which we'll see in a minute, which included most of these Canadian prairies here. So that's Saskatchewan there. So those are the 10 provinces of Canada. Let's just review quick here, going from west to east. We've got British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland and Labrador. That's one province. So there are also 3 territories in Canada. And like I mentioned, kind of, unlike the provinces, the territories have no inherent sovereignty. They've only got the powers that the federal government delegates to them. So it's basically, the territories are, here's the 60-degree latitude mark. It's this land north of 60 degrees, west of the Hudson Bay, and all these islands north of the mainland, even including, you know, the James Bay and Hudson Bay Islands. So that's the territory. So let's do the same thing with these 3 territories, go alphabetically and take a look at each one. So this is called the Northwest Territories. Okay, this red area here and going up here. Okay. This again is a map by MapGrid. Thank you. It's got a land area of approximately 442,000 square miles. The population is only 45,000. So it's the second largest of the 3 territories, and most populous, believe it or not, with only 45,000 people. So around here is Yellowknife, which is the capital and most populous. But what's interesting is it's the only city in this whole territory. I mean, the rest are communities, but they're too small to be cities. So here on this lake is Yellowknife. It's got about almost 20,000 people or so. This is called the Great Slave Lake. And that's actually the 10th largest lake in the world and deepest in North America. So here's Yellowknife, 20,000 people, but the only city in this whole territory here. So what happened in 1870, the Northwest Territories entered the Canadian Confederation, okay? And it's been divided 4 times historically to create new provinces and territories or enlarge existing ones. So the current borders date from April 1st, 1999, when they cut into it again by creating this new territory, which we'll look at in a second, Nunavut to the east. Okay, so here's Northwest Territories, here's Nunavut, here's the Yukon, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan. This area here, it's roughly equal to France, Portugal, and Spain combined. So that's the Northwest Territories. So this is Nunavut. All this red area here, the mainland stuff and all these islands, that's Nunavut. Nunavut literally just means our land. Okay, it's the largest northernmost territory. And then, like we just said, April 1st, 1999, it was separated officially from the Northwest Territories here. So it's the 5th largest country subdivision in the world, and second in North America after Greenland here. So it's big. The capital it used to be called Frobisher Bay. It's on Baffin Island. Here's Baffin Island, and here's the capital inside here. It's called Iqaluit. Okay, so you got this whole territory here. Here in Baffin Island is the capital of Iqaluit. And you know, we talked about Ellesmere Island up here and the Victoria Islands to the west, and you know, all these islands even here in James Bay and the Hudson Bay, the Ungava Bays. These are all part of this new territory of Nunavut. Fun with Map fact, it's Canada's only geopolitical region that is not connected to the rest of North America by highway. So it's really out there. It's the least densely populated major country subdivision in the world if you don't consider Antarctica, even less than Greenland. There's about 40,000 people. Most of them are Inuits, and the landmass it's almost as big as Mexico, so the population density is really small. And of course, we heard about Ellesmere Island. We heard about the world's northernmost permanently inhabited place, Alert. That's all in Nunavut, this new territory here in Canada. So finally, the smallest and westernmost, last of the territories, this is the Yukon in red, or just Yukon. It's got about 45,000 people. Down here is its territorial capital, Whitehorse, and that's larger than any settlement in any of the three territories up here. So Whitehorse down here is in the Yukon. It was split off from the Northwest Territories here in 1898, and they called it the Yukon Territory. Here's an interesting fact. Over here, is Mount Logan, and it's in the Yukon here. It's the highest mountain in Canada and second highest in the North American continent. It's at 19,551 feet, and the only one bigger is like its neighbor here in Alaska, which is used to be Mount McKinley, now it's Mount Denali. So here's Mount Logan, 19,551 feet, and next to it is Mount McKinley, and those number 1 and number 2. Here in Yukon. That's a look at Canada. We did the 10 provinces down here and saw how most of the population was along close to the U.S. border here to the south. And now we've just done the 3 territories and saw how the Northwest Territories have been kind of carved out over the years to create some other provinces and territories. So that's a look at Canada's 10 provinces and 3 territories. I hope now you recognize the 10 provinces and 3 territories of Canada. We went over them a lot. For us in the United States, especially here in the North, Canada is very familiar, but still very few knew all those details. Where I live in Cleveland, Ohio, Canada is just 50 miles north on Lake Erie. So directly north is from us is a cool little village called Erieau, and I've visited there, and there's a beach next to it called Rondo Beach, also in southwest Ontario, and it's so close that I would pick up Cleveland radio stations when I was there. So some have claimed that if the weather's right, you can see Canada from Cleveland across the lake. Erie's the shallowest of the Great Lakes, so it's most likely to freeze, and it does so frequently. People have driven and taken ice boats and all across the lake when it's frozen. Not recommended. When I was young and stupid, or more stupid, I remember my friends and me we'd go out on the lake when it was frozen, and sometimes a couple miles out. It was like being on a different planet. It was just so quiet and so broad and so just ice, and luckily nothing bad happened, but that was really an experience. So we definitely have to drill down sometime with Fun with Maps episodes on other various parts of Canada, because it is a huge and fascinating country. But until next time, I'm your host, Dan Hansen. Keep on having fun with maps.